Morning, team.
Steve! Today's the big one. I take it you're ready?
More than ready.
A word of advice. The average juror isn't made of the same stuff as you.
Meaning what?
This is what you've been waiting for. A chance to tell your side of the story. You can't afford to look too cool.
A bit more emotion.
It wouldn't go amiss.
Emotion it is.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Mr. Owen, does not deny that he's done wrong. But he deeply regrets hiding Miss Duncan's body. He knows he should have reported this terrible crime as soon as it happened. So, why does he stand before you today? When Mr. Owen arrived in Walford, he soon befriended a troubled young man whose parents had deserted him, Matthew Rose. My client started to look after Matthew. Now, Matthew began to rely on my client. Very soon, Mr. Owen had become the father figure in Matthew Rose's life. Now, I suggest that Mr. Owen stands before you today because Matthew Rose had become the son he'd always wished for. And when Matthew Rose killed Saskia Duncan, my client couldn't face the thought of handing him over to the police to be sent to prison. He preferred to lie and to break the law in order to stop Matthew Rose's life from being destroyed, as he will now explain to you. I call Mr. Stephen Owen as my first witness. You soon settled in Walford.
Yeah. It wasn't long after buying the club that I had new friends. A whole new way of life. I felt as if I'd come home.
Mr. Owen, a nightclub can conjure up the image of a shadowy underworld figure.
Not at all. It was a friendly, respectable club. You know, I even ran salsa classes to give the local pensioners a good night out.
How soon after arriving in Walford did you meet Matthew Rose?
He was about one of the first people I spoke to. You know, we got chatting. We're both into music. Both liked the same bands.
You became friends?
Yeah, I like Matt. He seemed like a great kid. I felt sorry for him.
Sorry for him?
Yeah, his parents were moving away from the area. He was finding it hard to cope. I thought I'd give him a break.
How did you do that?
Matt kept hanging around the club. He seemed pathetic. He wasn't a professional or anything, but I decided to let him DJ.
Why was that?
To give him back some self-respect. You know, he was at a low point. I just wanted to show him that. Someone cared.
Right, you got your cash card?
Yeah, it's in my purse.
Ring me later.
As soon as I know what's happening.
You've run after Nanny, haven't you? I feel awful. I've spoken to her for months. We haven't spoke much, have we? I do love you, Mum.
I love you too, Sonia. I'm so sorry about everything that's happened.
Just forget about it.
Whose idea was it to bury Miss Duncan's body?
I'm sorry to say it was mine. It sounds unbelievable now, but Matt never meant to. You know, he was standing there. He was shocked. He was distraught. I had to do something to help him. I mean, he'd only done it to stop her from killing me.
Would you say you panicked?
Yeah, at first. But Saskia was just lying there on the floor. I mean, no matter how much trouble she'd caused, I had once loved her. And I thought to myself, one life's already been ruined. Why ruin another one?
You're saying you wanted to help Matthew?
I thought hiding the body would be the easy way out. But I was wrong. It's haunted me ever since. And I just can't get the image of her lying on that floor out of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Owen.
Mr. Owen, I put it to you that you have bullied and manipulated Matthew Rose ever since you struck the fatal blow that killed Saskia Duncan.
No, I'm sorry, that's not true.
I'm sorry, Mr. Owen, but when it comes to telling the truth, you can hardly expect to be believed, can you?
Look, I admit that when it comes to this, I have lied.
Only because you have no option but to admit it. Some of your lies have been quite staggering. For example, you're helping Mrs. Fielding look for her sister.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how terrible I felt about that, but I was protecting Matthew.
Would you agree that Saskia Duncan had been making your new life a misery?
Yeah, I would.
She'd vandalized your car, ransacked your flat, ruined your relationship with Melanie Healy.
That's correct.
You must have been running out of patience with her.
I was sick of her. You know, I just wish she'd go away.
I put it to you that when Saskia Duncan burst into your office on Valentine's Day, your patience finally ran out.
You're right. It did.
Whereas Matthew Rose had no motive whatsoever in wanting Saskia Duncan out of the way.
He was trying to stop her from strangling me.
And as my client insists, he was merely trying to pull her off you.
Which is what he should have done. He should never have picked up the ashtray.
Hi. I know it's a silly question, but how are you feeling? As if I'm gonna get what you want? Yeah, that's how I was. No, it's not so bad once you get in there. You know, this is gonna be the first time I've seen Matthew since he dumped me. How is he? Well, he's nervous, but he's coping. It feels strange not seeing him after everything we've been through. Look, Teresa, you know the only reason he wanted to talk to me because we were such old friends. You know there was never anything going on. Yeah, and what about when he's cleared? Doesn't matter. Whichever way it goes, I'm not going to be around anymore. You're still going to be in London, though. Yeah, maybe, but I'm about to start a whole new life. You know, with a new home, new friends. I wish you weren't going. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you too. You two just make sure you look after each other, all right?
Mr. Owen, why did you report Matthew Rose as having committed a murder?
Because the state Matt was in. I couldn't see any other way out.
But hadn't Mr. Rose been in a state ever since Miss Duncan's death?
Yeah, because he couldn't cope with what he had done.
So I put it to you again. Why wait to report Matthew Rose as having committed a murder?
I knew Matt was going on the run. You know, I wanted the police to find him before he made things worse for himself.
Or isn't the truth that you were worried that the police had found Miss Duncan's body and were gathering evidence?
That's why I went to find him. To talk him into giving himself up.
I put it to you, Mr. Owen, that you were trying to save your own skin. You were determined to get your lies in first.
You know, that's funny. I thought you were accusing me and Matt of planning these confessions together.
Indeed, which leads me to my next question. Do you not agree it's a coincidence that you both decided to go to the police and say exactly the same thing in the same 24 hours?
Yeah, I suppose it is.
So, what you'd have the jury believe, Mr. Owen, is that at first you didn't report Matthew Rose to the police because you were protecting him. However, you later did report him to the police because you were protecting him.
That's right, yeah. Things had changed.
Yes, they had. Miss Duncan's body had been found and you knew the game was up. I have no more questions.
Kathy, can I have a quick word?
As long as it is quick.
Look, I don't want to start anything, but you don't seem to be very happy with me.
Is that right?
If there's something I've done wrong, I'd like to know about it.
Don't you come the innocent with me.
What do you mean?
I know what you're up to. Your little visits to Steve in prison.
What exactly are you talking about?
I've read your salt before.
My salt?
And I'm warning you, I am not going to stand by and watch you take him to the cleaners.
I then studied the fracture lines, which, as you will see, extend to the base, vertex, and the side of the skull. On studying the angle of these fractures, I was able to determine where the assailant was positioned.
Which was where?
Well, in my opinion, the fatal blow was struck from behind.
Just so we can be clear about this. You would say that whoever killed Miss Duncan was standing behind her?
Without a doubt.
You would therefore say that as Mr. Owen was in front of Miss Duncan, he couldn't have struck the blow?
The pattern of the fracture would make it almost impossible.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Dr. Stewart, the Crown's pathologist has stated quite clearly that it is impossible to say from where the blow was struck.
Then I beg to differ. My experience tells me otherwise.
What's the matter?
I just had a run-in with Melanie.
What about?
Well, I told her straight. I'm not going to stand by and watch her make a fool out of Ian.
Yeah, I meant to have a word with you about that.
Do you excuse us a minute, Pauline?
Look, just calm down.
Just excuse us for a minute, please.
I visited Steve once, and that was to tell him to stay away from me.
Well, he's hardly likely to pop round while he's in prison, is he? And does Ian know about this?
No, because there was nothing to tell him about.
You're the only one round here who stood up for Steve in court.
I just told the truth, and how dare you accuse me? This from a woman who slept with a vicar.
What's that got to do with this?
Not very nice when people go digging around in your past, is it? You still in love with my brother, are you, Kathy?
I don't have to listen to this.
If Alex was still around, would you be jumping into bed with him? Yeah, well, I'm warning you. I can give as good as I get.
I swear by Almighty God to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Matthew, what was your first impression on meeting Mr. Owen?
I was very impressed. He had the car, the money, the clothes. I suppose I wanted to be like that.
You wanted to be friends with Mr. Owen?
Definitely. Steve was going places. I wanted him to take me with him.
How were you feeling generally at this time?
Well, my mum and dad had just moved to Leeds. I felt a bit deserted.
Did this contribute to you and Mr. Owen becoming quite close?
Probably. I looked up to Steve.
And how did you feel when Mr. Owen offered you a job?
I was on a high. When we were getting the club ready for the opening night, it felt like we were a team. It was probably the best time of my life.
What was your first impression of Saskia Duncan when you met her?
I liked her at first.
You say at first?
I could see she was trouble. She was too desperate to get Steve back.
What happened when Saskia Duncan turned up at the club on the opening night?
Well, Steve had asked me to watch out for her, but she managed to sneak past me and go into the office.
And how did you feel about that?
I felt like I'd let Steve down. So, I went into the office to see if he was all right.
And what happened when you entered the office?
Saskia was on top of Steve, trying to strangle him. So, I grabbed her to pull her off. And she was like a wild animal. And she attacked me and threw me back and then flew at Steve again.
And what did she do to him?
She was trying to strangle him with his tie. He grabbed the ashtray and he hit her. He didn't mean to, it was just a desperate attempt to get her off of him. And that was it, and she was dead.
How would you describe your reaction to this?
I can't describe it. 1 minute I was laughing and joking. Next, I'm looking at a dead body.
What did you do when you realised that she was dead?
I couldn't believe it. I grabbed the phone to call the police. But he wouldn't let me.
Mr. Owen stopped you from reporting it? How?
Steve comes across as very, very cool. But there's another side to him. Just underneath the surface. And when he turns nasty...
How nasty was Mr. Owen?
When you've looked up to someone and trusted them, and suddenly they turn round to you, as if to say, you're going to be next. It's very frightening.
What was your reaction when Saskia Duncan's body was found?
I couldn't handle it. I just wanted to get away.
Did you tell Mr. Owen this?
Well, to be honest, he caught me trying to steal some money from his office. He closed the door and said I wasn't going anywhere.
What did you think he was going to do?
I thought I'd end up like Saskia on the office floor.
You feared for your life?
I pushed past him and ran out, got Teresa, and left Wolford straight away. I'd let it slip to Steve that she knew about Saskia. I thought he'd kill us both.
Matthew, could you explain why you stole Mr. Owen's credit card?
Because I was desperate for money to get away. He terrified me. He didn't hit me. He's far more clever than that. He kept telling me that if I said anything to anyone, he was going to make sure that I get sent down for life. He told me I wouldn't be able to survive in prison. And by now, I believed him. So I'd do anything to get away.
Thank you, Matthew. I have no more questions.
Mr. Rose, you claim you've been intimidated all along by Mr. Owen?
I don't claim. I was.
Then why didn't you simply move away?
Because Steve wouldn't let me.
Well, Mr. Owen wasn't with you 24 hours a day.
But Wolford was my home.
But I thought you said you felt neglected there, deserted.
I did. But that's where my friends were, my business was.
But didn't you also say you neglected your business and friends?
That doesn't mean I'm going to move away on my own.
If you were so terrified of Mr. Owen, why continue working there?
I had to try something to get through it.
You're saying you tried to get through it by working at the scene of where the killing took place?
Yeah, as if nothing had happened.
But you said that not a day went by that you weren't haunted by Miss Duncan's death.
And sometimes I would pretend that I was all right so that Steve wouldn't get suspicious.
Oh, you pretended?
Yes.
Why did you accept money from Mr. Owen? I shall ask you again. Why did you accept money from Mr. Owen?
It was just easier.
Then why did you lie about receiving the money to the police?
I thought it looked bad.
You're right, Mr. Rose. It looks very bad indeed. You see, you say, and I quote, you panicked. You couldn't handle it. You were haunted by it. You lost it. You had to get away. But at the same time, you insisted you never did anything wrong. I put it to you, these are the actions of a guilty man.
I saw it happen. That was enough.
Everything that went wrong. Miss Duncan's death. Falling out with your parents and friends. Stealing. Running away from the police. You say all this was Mr. Owen's fault. You aren't to blame for anything.
It was his fault.
I put it to you, Mr. Rose. Ever since you lost your temper and killed Miss Duncan, knowing the affection Mr. Owen had for you, you manipulated him into protecting you and giving you money.
That's not true.
When he finally refused to do this, you stole his credit card and went on the run.
I was trying to get away from him.
You were trying to get away from justice. Is it not true you were preparing to leave the country? Is it true or not?
Yes, it is.
I have no more questions.
Would you say that there was a change in Matthew after February the 14th?
Can't say the exact day, but it was round about then.
Round about then, you noticed a change in him?
Definitely. He was miserable, he was drinking, something was wrong.
What did you do about this?
I kept asking him what was the matter.
How did Matthew respond?
He'd say it was nothing and told me to leave him alone. One night in the Vic, he was in quite a bad way.
What do you mean by in quite a bad way?
Upset. He started crying. We were in the loos and it was as if he had something really big to tell me.
What makes you say really big?
Just the way he said he had something to tell me.
And what did Matthew say?
Well, he didn't have the chance because Steve walked in and told me to get out of there.
Did Mr. Owen threaten Matthew?
Not with actual words, but it was obvious that Matthew didn't have a choice.
Before Mr. Owen sent you away, what exactly did Matthew say to you?
The exact words were, it wasn't my fault.
Don't do cappuccinos, do ya?
You're right, we don't.
So what sort of coffees do you do then?
We do 2 sorts, black or white. Now what's it to be?
Oh, 2 white then, please, Kath. What's she doing it?
I asked Nicky to come.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about music.
Well, I was just saying to Enrico, I don't know a thing about jazz music. I'll have to listen and find out.
I knew you wouldn't mind.
Well, of course not.
You said that Matthew's exact words were, it wasn't my fault.
That's right.
If Matthew Rose had wished to put it across that he had nothing to do with Miss Duncan's death, he might say, it wasn't me, or I didn't do it. But to say it wasn't my fault suggests that he took part in some sort of action.
No, I'm sorry, you're just twisting it.
I put it to you again. It wasn't my fault suggests that he did something that he hadn't meant to do.
It depends on how you say it. Matthew said it wasn't my fault, which definitely meant that he didn't do anything.
If we analyse the exact word...
You can analyse what you want, but you're not going to change my mind.
Not even with reasoned argument?
I was there and I know what he meant.
My lord.
Mr. Mitchell, if you could just answer Miss Mill's questions.
I have done. I swore I'd tell the truth, and I'll say how I saw it, and how she wants me to.
You must listen to what Miss Mill says, and then answer to what she specifically asks you.
Yeah, all right. But I still know that Matthew meant that he didn't do anything to Saskia.
Mr. Owen!
He's just one of Matthew's mates, lied to try and get him off!
Mr. Owen, retake your seat. I shall not tell you again.
How can you do this to me? Hey, why don't you just tell the truth?
Take him down, please.
You know who did it! You've got to tell the truth!